Good evening. The February 22nd, 2023 public session meeting of the Community Relations Commission is called to order. There are a couple of things we will take care of on this evening, and so I want to give you a sense of how things will flow. We thank you for your presence and making yourselves available for what I hope will be a very informative conversation. There are a couple of matters that the Commission needs to attend to as it relates to our public session agenda first, and there may be members of the Commission who will arrive shortly, as we know that it is rush hour in Baltimore City. With that, to the Commissioners, good evening. Commissioner Evangelista is on the phone. Commissioners Foster and Johnson are present with me at the desk, and we will move in this order. We'll begin this evening with the Director's Report. The Director's Report, for those who may not know, is an update on the status of the administrative workings of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights as it relates to the Community Relations Commission. So some of this will be statistical data on complaints and other administrative actions. If we do not have quorum at the time of the Director's Report, we will then table the approval of minutes until we get the quorum, and then we'll move into the public discussion with the leadership of the Baltimore City Department of Public Works. So with that, Chief Kelly, whoever you have designated to share with us the Director's Report, you have the floor.
Good evening. I'm short, got to move this down a little bit. Good evening, commissioners and guests and staff. My name is Zelma Ortiz, and I'm one of the investigators for the Community Relations Commission at the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. And our January Director's Report is as follows. CRC staff continues to actively work on community outreach and education presentations for spring 2022. Or rather 2023, apologies. The presentations will focus on Article 4, employment discrimination, and fair housing training for property managers and private landlords during Fair Housing Month, which is the month of April. Staff will also conduct fair housing training and outreach to the Latino community in Baltimore City in Spanish. CRC staff has been working to support the upcoming Department of Public Works investigation hearing or investigative hearing to be held today at 6 p.m. or shortly after this commission meeting. It will be held here at the City Hall at the BOE Hyman Pressman Boardroom, and it will be broadcast live via Charm TV and accessible via WebEx. CRC has onboarded a new investigator. Shout out to Andrea Pineda. She comes with 10 years of human resources and anti-discrimination compliance experience. We're very excited to have her. I will be going over and reviewing the statistical data in a moment, but before then, I want to go over just some quick legislative updates for the 2023 General Assembly session, that is currently underway. So the Office of Equity and Civil Rights assisted in providing support letters for HB 264/SB 400, which is places of public accommodation, motion picture houses, and captioning. OECR also provided a letter of support for SB 47, which is titled Evidence, Wiretapping, and Electronic Surveillance in Fair Housing Testing. On to our statistical data. I'll do a review of January and then a review of what the year has been totaled so far. So for the year of January, we had 4 email inquiries, online and email inquiries, 7 telephone inquiries, no in-person inquiries. We had 1 intake completed, 1 investigation completed, 1 investigation withdrawn. And that's the totals for the month of January. Overall, for the fiscal year thus far, we've had 52 online inquiries, 57 telephone inquiries, 0 in-person inquiries. We've had 2 intakes, 29 investigations completed, 2 administrative closures, 1 settled investigation, 1 withdrawn investigation, 17 findings concluded as no probable cause, and 0 findings as probable cause, with a total of $250 in restitution. That concludes the director's report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and noting that Director Moore is a bit under the weather, so she is not present with us this evening, so we wanted to receive her report for the record. We will just note that there will be some follow-up in any that the commissioners might ask for as well, but to get a better understanding of the two pieces of proposed legislation in terms of the support that was given and what the effects might be, I will ask that we pull the current versions of those bills and disseminate them so that we might be able to review them, and if there is a fiscal note attached to any of them, we might review them as well to look at the policy implications. We welcome Ms. Pineda. Thank you, and congratulations on joining the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. We're glad to be in partnership with you, and we look forward to working with you in the days to come. We do have quorum now. Commissioner Finnegan-Carr has joined us and survived the traffic, and so we're glad to see her as the Secretary of the Commission. At this point, Commissioners, you should have received the public session minutes from November of 2022, which was our last formal public session meeting. I will give you a few moments to review those notes, and in just a moment I will ask for a motion to approve the record. If any of the commissioners need more time to review, please indicate so. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as they have been presented? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that the November 16th, 2022 public session minutes be approved as presented. All in favor by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no. All right, thank you very much. With that, and I will just defer to Director Mitchell and see if everybody's ready, because we're a little ahead of schedule, but we are ready to proceed if you are.
Ready.
You're ready. All right. Well, good evening to you. At this point, we will transition a few minutes early into the public hearing for the Baltimore City Department of Public Works. Just wanted to kind of frame for all who are observing, whether you are watching on Charm TV or on WebEx or in the room, to kind of give a framework of what this is. The authority for public hearings comes to the Community Relations Commission under Article 4 of the Baltimore City Code, and that is to make sure that the Community Relations Commission's mission of making sure that discrimination is eliminated in all forms in Baltimore City is achieved. We have been having a number of public hearings with cabinet-level agencies to better understand not only what they do, but also how they do. Yeah. And so this is a good learning moment for all of us, because we seem to get some things confused when we hear the Baltimore City Department of Public Works. Most of the time, folks think we're talking about the Board of Public Works down in Annapolis, who spends all of the state money. And so we want to make a very clear distinction. And so we're grateful that Director Mitchell, you have made yourself available along with your team. So we will say good evening to you. The format will be that Director Mitchell will offer whatever presentation he will have. There will be a period of engagement from the commissioners. Then we will open for public comment if there is any. And then we will follow up with any questions that may need to be responded to after our time tonight. It is quite possible and highly likely that we will not go all the way to 8 o'clock, so don't feel like we have to occupy all of the time. Once we have taken care of the business for the evening, we will be done for the evening. Let me just give folks a heads up. In a few minutes, I may just have to step out very briefly, but please continue with the meeting. Madam Secretary, you'll have the chair when I step away.
Yes, sir.
I'm having a bit of allergic response, as you all can hear. We didn't get a winter, and so some stuff that should have died a few weeks ago is still in the air, and so I'll just need to step out and take care of that very shortly. With that, Director Mitchell, thank you for being here. You have the floor.
No, thank you, Chair. So first, good evening, everyone. First, my name is Jason Mitchell. I'm the Director of Public Works. I do want to welcome our Chair, our Reverend, our Doctor, Yuri, and members of this Community Relations Committee. First, I just want to thank you all for hosting us today so that we can prevent some great administrative things that we're doing here in the program and really talk about some of the compliance challenges, but also opportunities that we have here in DPW. Just to give you kind of update what we plan on doing today, my job currently is to do this kickoff. And then we're going to hand it off to the team to go through different phases of our presentation. We're doing that, number one, so that you can hear from the people that lead that unit within our department, but also so that you can get to know some of our fabulous team here in DPW, because I think it's good for everyone to know that the work that we're doing is it doesn't just come from the director. It's a huge team within DPW that makes it all happen. So first, secondly, our goal is really, I think as the chair mentioned, is really shed light on some of the things that we are doing. Although we love the Board of Public Works to vote and give us some money, we do want to let folks know what their Baltimore City Public Works Department is doing. So we have some information on our slide deck, but also we stand ready to ask questions that you all just may have of the department. And so first, I'm going to hand it off to our Deputy Director, Richard Luna, to kind of walk us through the presentation and then walk us through our slide deck. And then we'll be standing here ready to answer any questions that you have of the department. And I just want to thank this commission for hosting us tonight, and I look forward to the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mitchell. Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Richard Luna. I'm the Deputy Director for the Department of Public Works. If we could advance to the next slide. What I'll do here in these first few slides is essentially give you the larger overview of the agency and the department before I hand it off to our HR and our Office of Equity and Environmental Justice staff, who will deliver the remaining parts of the presentation. So for the Commission and for the public, DPW's mission is to support the health, environment, and economy of our city and the region by providing customers with safe drinking water and keeping neighborhoods and waterways clean. Our vision is to be a strong proponent and protector of our environment and the health and vitality of our communities. Next slide. So we say those things because DPW is a very large agency. Right now we have just over 2,000 current employees. We're budgeted at close to about 2,800. We're represented by, our employees represent 3 different unions here in Baltimore City. That's CUB, Local 44, and MAPS. And the agency itself is divided between 3 large boroughs: administration, solid waste, water and wastewater. Solid waste and wastewater, those 2 bureaus are essentially our public-facing entities, right? So that's our staff that are going out, picking up trash, recycling. They're delivering you clean water. They're processing that water and making sure that our waterways are staying clean. DPW is the largest agency in Baltimore City. Just to give you a budget perspective, we have about $660 million in operating funds. We have about $330 million in capital budgets on an annual basis. We operate 24/7. Our staff is out there day in and day out, providing the services that are essential to Baltimore City and to the region, as we do provide services in Baltimore County. Just a few things to highlight. We've been looking at making investments into our department's workforce. We have 67 new vehicles that are currently on order that should be arriving in phased approach over the next 3 years. We've also have facility improvements totaling about $17 million in capital improvement project plans. And then we also administer the Pretty Boy, Lock Raven, and Liberty reservoirs, which hold a combined 86 billion gallons of water. Next slide. Here's the Next, there we go. Here's the overall demographics of the DPW workforce, starting from left to right. We have about 59% of our workforce identifies as Black or African American. 32% is that larger category that you see across from it that's unknown or just unidentified or unspecified. Gender breakdown, 74% identify as male, 26% identify as female. And then as far as the age range, the majority of DPW's workforce, so anything over 50% of the workforce is ages over 51 years of age. We can go to the next slide. Just to talk about the diversity efforts when it comes to recruitment. So DPW partners with the city's Department of Human Resources. And I know there's been a lot of efforts here in these areas, especially how we recruit Spanish speakers or non-English speakers. And so in some of the work that we've done, we've actually done in-person recruitment fairs. DPW has, and we have 2 more planned in the next 2 months. But at those fairs, you have videos that explain the process, the city's recruitment process in Spanish for those residents. And then right now, currently, our internal HR staff, in partnering with DHR, is looking to see how else we can better utilize organizations that are more targeted or have more direct outreach to those populations. And a few of those possible areas there are listed on the screen for you. So that essentially gives you the larger snapshot. What we'll do next is turn it over to our HR staff to present a few slides, and we'll also have our Office of Environmental and Equity Justice as well present.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Deputy Director Luna. My name is Thomas Pointer. I'm a manager within the HR office. Give me 1 second while I gather my notes. So on this slide here, I like to say that basically our office, DPWHR, I selfishly like to say, is the engine that drives this agency. HR is the center of everything, responsible for carrying out most of the important actions that require this business to run efficiently. Starting with one of our most important efforts, that would be recruitment. What is the office without recruitment? Then we have our next focus of the operation, which is ELR, Employee Labor Relations. The Employee Labor Relations Unit is responsible for maintaining, providing the information to not only just rank and file employees, but to supervision and management regarding the rules and regulations that dictate and govern employee behavior. Then we have our absence management. Absence management is an area within HR that deals with FMLA, ADA, our extended sick leave requests, our leave of absence, and our sick bank through our unions and light duty. So as we deal with all of the aspects that make the agency function, these are part of the policies and rules that govern the operation to keep everything moving smoothly and keeping our employees informed of how they can communicate with HR either directly or through their management team to get all the information that they require. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is the mission statement, and I will hand this over to our Equity and Environmental Justice Chief.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Marco Merrick. I'm the Chief of the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice in DPW. And as you can see before you, we do have a mission statement. And for the sake of understanding, everybody can actually view that yourselves. We have, and what I would say is that we applaud and celebrate DPW in having labeled the agency with one mantra, which is equity in all we do, and understanding that we comport with the city's equity ordinance and recognize that as the city's largest agency, we also move forward with initiatives, programs, and partnerships that model and exemplify not just for our agency, but for the city's agencies and the entities with which we work. Housed in the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice is our EEO officer, Philip Gaines, who is here with us this evening. Also, I'm pleased to say that we have recently hired a new acting chief of the Office of Water, advocacy and customer appeals, which is part of legislation that has been in place, and we have moved that envelope forward. And that acting chief is with us this evening, R. Anthony Mills. I'm very happy to share with that. And as I've talked about our initiatives, I'm very happy to also report and share that DPW, in everything that we do, of course, establishing equity, stands up everything about the agency that represents diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. They're important, and under those, of course, our training and education with our employees, our programs, our partnerships, some of which namely are a partnership with Morgan State University School of Community Health and Policy, which is research around environmental injustices that impact urban centers like Baltimore City. Also, Morgan State University School of Engineering and Coppin State University's School of Science and Technology. And we're standing up a partnership with the Pratt Library. Next slide.
The next slide would be me again. So the question is, are there confidentiality policies for general employees when speaking about other employees' health and medical information? So the answer to that is basically there is a confidentiality agreement that is signed by the manager of the health data aspect of DPW HR. That would be our absence management section. And that confidentiality statement is not only signed by the manager, it's additionally signed by the program compliance officer who facilitates the intakes for FMLA, ADA, and any other requests regarding a medical request for clearance. Next slide. Different. Okay, here we go. Is the department's policy and procedures on reasonable accommodations widely available and viewed on an annual, quarterly basis? So yes, the process for applying for ADA and FMLA is provided to all employees. Everyone knows where to go and who to go to when seeking that information and filling out or receiving all of the forms and documents needed to fill out for FMLA and ADA. However, what we have noticed that the biggest misinterpretation about the whole FMLA process is there has been a misinterpretation regarding the prescription. So what the agency wants to do, what the absence management unit wants to do, is to begin a roadshow where we go out to all the different locations and sites sometime around the mid-spring, so we can teach both the employees who receive the FMLA and their prescriptions, their supervision and their management, to understand the prescriptions. A lot of times what we've noticed is sometimes when an employee functions outside of that prescription, instead of treating it like a situation of the attendance standard policy in terms of a violation, we try to get their FMLA prescription reassessed through their physician to get them to understand you have to follow the letter of the law as it relates to the prescription provided by your physician. If your physician agrees that your prescription has to be reassessed, then obviously there's no form of disciplinary action. However, getting back to the original point of the question, we're leading an effort sometime around mid to late spring to try to teach everyone understanding how to interpret the FMLA policy and the prescriptions as it relates to all of the applicants who apply for it. Next slide. CSR has received complaints of harassment from a few DPW locations. Is the department's policy and procedures regarding anti-harassment widely available and viewed on an annual and quarterly basis? So yes, the policy is not only widely available, but it is viewable on the city's websites. Resources are at an arm's reach or earshot for any employee who desires to get the information. Also, EAP is available for all employees who have questions or who want to receive any type of intake if they have questions or concerns about anti-harassment or discrimination. Next slide.
Please explain or detail some instances where employees have filed internal discrimination harassment complaints and the department has handled the incident to the complainant's satisfaction. So this slide here we're looking at represents 2 examples of employees who have filed complaints of issues of harassment or discrimination against their managers, and both cases were handled to the satisfaction of the employees. The whole process of it was there was a full investigation conducted. There were statements provided or statements provided by the complainant. There was questions given to or asked of the manager. After a full investigation was done, a full report is completed and provided to the manager and to the employee regarding the investigation. And as I stated, these 2 here were done to the satisfaction of the employees, of the complainants. Next slide. We have received a couple of complaints that allege discriminatory promotions. Please explain the promotion process and if this process is widely available and viewed on an annual or quarterly basis. So the promotionary process is regulated by the rules of DHR, including the language in the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. Primarily, when we talk about the MOU, we're referring to Local 44, ASME, or we're talking about CUB, City Union of Baltimore. So according to the language within their contracts, promotions are based on seniority, those who have the most years of seniority. As it relates to MAPS employees, our exempt employees, managerial and professional society, those promotions are based on those who secure the highest score during the interview process. And those are the guidelines in which HR follows when conducting interviews. That is our interview process. Next slide. How are you working with staff to ensure that after they have filed a discrimination complaint, whether internally or externally, that they understand the employment actions taken against them afterwards? Is there any training or advertisement given to HR staff or management staff against retaliation? That's you, right? I overstepped that.
No, it's okay. It's all right. You know about it because we all work collaboratively in the agency. So in the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice, we collaboratively work with HR, but we also have, as you can see in the bullets, a relationship with the Department of Human Resources that enables us to execute due diligence around training and education for our employees. And of course, when we do that, actually we enable an intake process, and then we acknowledge the complaint, we identify if it actually meets the specifications of an actual complaint or discrimination case, and then we exercise what is fact-finding to arrive at whatever the conclusions are in investigation. The meeting is scheduled with the complainant, and they are informed of the outcome of the investigation, as well as the HR staff, the managers and supervisors of that particular employee. Additionally, the city's EEO policy is shared with the complainant, and they are reminded about the protection against retaliation, and the employee, the EAP program is offered to all parties involved. And of course, we ensure that all of these investigations are confidential. Employees know that. We, in our fact findings, we absolutely impress upon them and ask them to please retain all of those transactions as proprietary. Next slide. So, of course, in speaking about LGBTQIA matters in the agency, as we have talked about equity in all we do, this is equally as important. As you can see, we follow the city's EEO policy and the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice in our new employee welcome experience, which was once called new employee orientation. We bi-weekly have new employees coming, and during that time when I present the diversity lens training, we address matters around protected classes, which include, of course, the LGBTQIA community. We partner with our Office of Safety and Training and Professional Development to implement ongoing training for all staff, and we are actually looking at how we might schedule a rhythm so that, because people don't forget, they often need to be reminded. So what we're looking at is trying to create a rhythm so that we go back and do that on an annual basis or maybe a biannual basis. And so the agency and our office, me being the chief of the equity office, stress the priority, the importance of adhering to these laws and ensuring that these policies and the equity ordinance is basic knowledge for everybody. As we're talking about training, anti-discrimination and anti-harassment training, again, as we onboard our new employees, Mr. Gaines, who is our EEO officer, also participates in our welcome, our DPW welcome experience for our new employees. We had one yesterday and today because the week actually began on Tuesday. And in that process, in conjunction with DHR's, the city's DHR, we have a schedule. As a matter of fact, it's happening monthly now, so that all employees are required to attend mandatory training. And disseminating that information, not only are the employees notified, all managers and supervisors are. So we actually get a report of everybody who registers, who shows up, who does not. We get a rundown. DHR actually reports that back to us. We then notify managers and supervisors. So to understand that we do have laborers and individuals who may not have access to equipment to log on, to get emails, to get notifications, it is incumbent that we impress upon our managers and supervisors to relay this information to our employees, because we find sometimes the communication lap is with our managers and supervisors, and then the report back to us for those who have not complied with the required training, then are aware of disciplinary actions, the steps that would be taken if they don't comport with the required training. Is this HR? Okay, regarding discriminatory complaints internally, these complaints or alleged complaints or cases from employees do come before the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice. There, of course, is a process for intake and acknowledgement, and then, of course, the fact-finding process that regards discrimination for our employees. And again, we raise high for incoming employees and then employees who are veterans in the agency the importance, the laws and guidelines that determine that discrimination, particularly as it relates to protected classes that are federal, state, and city, that this is adhered to in our agency. And our EEO officer conducts the fact-finding conferences with all parties involved. Before each of those conferences, before those fact-finding conferences, we share with all parties the confidentiality process, recollection, the importance of recollecting the events to the best of their ability, sharing with them, again, guidelines around protection against retaliation, because we know that statistically the number one occurrence around any case of discrimination or harassment or whatever it is, a complaint, is retaliation. That is a nationwide statistic. And then the outcome of the process is explained to the complainant and the respondent, and again, managers and supervisors and HR are notified by that. We are very proud that we have stood up in the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice an EEO complaint tracking system. We approached our IT department about a system that would enable us to actually document every letter, every correspondence, every report regarding each case, so that we can at any time just put our hands on any of the processes regarding any case. And as you hear, we have put the EEO investigation steps before you. If you'd like for us to elucidate on those, we can do that. But I've given you kind of a high-level overview of those. While I'm here, are there questions for the Equity Office?
Any questions from the commission?
I do have some. In terms of formality, do you want us to ask at the conclusion of this?
Well, I think it's probably, since we're pretty good on time, let's ask as we go while the questions and the conversations are fresh, if that's okay with you, Dr. Merrick.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, I'm Commissioner Johnson, and thank you so much for your presentation. I do have a few questions, and they're kind of grouped. The first one I do want to understand is, it sounds like I heard that there are two different promotion processes based on the category of employee. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So, so what I want to understand is, so are these employees, based on the category, are they kind of like in different kinds of jobs? Like can you help me to understand sort of the union labor sort of setup and
So-
how that works?
It's in different bargaining units. So we have two units we have two unions. So we have AFSCME, Local 44, and then we have CUB, City Union of Baltimore. Obviously, MAPS is not a union, it's just an agreement. But those two bargaining units, the language within their contract dictates promotions, dictates seniority.
And understood. So are those employees, so are both bargaining unit categories applied to the same type of job? So in other words, if an employee
So
clerk
there's
typist,
the way
you know,
that,
can be a clerk typist in one union and you can have another clerk typist in another union?
well, the jobs don't overlap like that. For instance, I'll give you an example. Local 44, all of the jobs for a CDL, commercial driver, those are only within 44. You don't find those jobs in CUB. So, and the way it all works is if you are a CDL 1 or a motor vehicle driver 1, and you're likely to get promoted to a 2, it's based on seniority. So it wouldn't be the person who applies and does the best during the interview. It's based on the person who's been there the longest. That's how the experience is dictated. And that is the language in the contract. And we have received grievances in the past because of erroneously not following that contract, most likely in CUB. CUB is quick to file a grievance if one of its bargaining unit members applies for a promotion within the City Union of Baltimore for the next level in the classification that holds or houses their jobs. They get it based on years of service, not who secures the highest score during the interview process, as it is allowed for MAPS employees.
Interesting. No, and I wanted to understand that because my other question deals with how, what have you seen in terms of outcomes as a result of this? I mean, I understand you're seeing outcomes, meaning based on some of the things you talked around demographics, are you finding that there are differences in the makeup of employees that are getting promoted based on those two different types of approaches to merit-based promotions, I guess?
No, I don't see a difference. Basically, through the interview process, some of the employees who don't see, I think the confusion for some employees, the where it gets is, you and I both apply for the same position. Let's say you and I are both in CUB, and you have 15 years of service and I have 5 years of service. And we're both applying for a Public Works Inspector 3. We're both 1s or we're both 2s. And as I stated, let's say you have 15 years of service, I have 5 years of service, but I get a 90 on the interview process, and let's say you score a 70. Technically, I would think I should get the job. But if I don't get the job and you get the job, I'm filing a grievance through my union. But then the union representative, the labor relations specialist, will then explain to me, based on the language in the contract, the person who has the most years of service is the one who secures the job, not the person who necessarily gets the highest score. And that has been an issue for a while, but that is the language in the contract because it's a collective bargaining agreement that we all have agreed to. And it's signed by HR, it's signed by the Labor Commissioner's office, it's signed by management.
Can I just piggyback on that for a second, and then you can go back, because I know you had another question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the disproportionate impact seen on your promotions especially as I'm looking at women? Only a quarter of your human resources, your demographics right now are women. And I have a feeling that if you're looking at seniority and if you're looking at your staffing in higher levels, management levels, supervisory levels, and looking at it demographically, even by gender of women, and not even looking at LGBTQ sexual orientation. I'm just looking at straight gender at this point, cisgender. I'm expecting that would also be disproportionately disqualifying a number of women who may have less seniority because of the fact that I'm also seeing the majority of your age are over 50, which would probably be the older generation of males who started in DPW years ago before as many women came into DPW. do you, is there a change? Is it, I mean, because I understand how unions work. I was in a union before I came to the role that I'm in now. Are there changes that are expected to be made even within the unions? Because that's disproportionately harming women union members to be able to move up into seniority and supervisory positions within DPW.
That is a challenge that would have to be handled during the negotiations. I do know we have negotiations pending, and the HR offices throughout the city, it's always asked by the Labor Commissioner's office to make suggestions on how some of the language in the contract could be changed. I already brought that up, believe it or not, regarding seniority beating out someone who has the highest score during the interview process. The negotiations hasn't started yet, but that is something that we want to address. But it's already in the contract, so it's kind of like you got to convince the unions to let that language go. Because although, as it was stated earlier, I think 29% of our employees are ages 19 to 20, and that makes up the majority in terms of 29% higher than any other demographic and with respect to the age range. So that's something that the unions would have to agree to. And obviously they would have to take it to their membership. And since most of their members would probably be of the older age, they would not want to lose out on a promotion to someone else who scored higher just because they've been here longer. But this is something we're aiming for when negotiations start.
Can I ask Commissioner Johnson, my apologies for chiming in here. One is, has the contract term expired? Is it just extended by MOU and you all are renegotiating, or is it still?
It's active.
It's active
until
right
the
now.
new one comes, yes.
All right. Is it mandatory that certain job classifications be part of the union?
Well, so for Local 44, that's our rank and file. For Cub City Union of Baltimore, that's primarily supervision. So they're pretty much designated like that. There aren't any.
Do they have to pay dues to the union?
They do. They pay dues to the union.
It's a requirement. If you're in a job classification that falls within the purview of either the ASME contract or the Cub contract, you are required to be a dues-paying member.
You are a dues-paying member. Some have opted out because I think something that was in the Supreme Court not too long ago.
There's an opt-out.
Yeah, I remember that. But you're still a part of that bargaining unit.
You're still part of the bargaining unit. You're
Yes.
covered by the contract. So the question that I have, particularly when it comes to the movement of federal monies, federal government has passed the infrastructure now law, where there will be designated federal dollars that will pass through the states to local governments. And whenever there is federal money involved in a potential disparate impact, we begin to invoke some of the challenges possibly around a violation of Title VI. So I would suggest, and I'm not sure whether or not there's been any consultation with the chief equity officer for the city in some of these negotiations, just to kind of understand the landscape of where things are. But I would suggest that that might be a consideration as you are actively in that process, so that some of these key questions can be raised during the negotiation. What I'm trying to avoid is the potential where there's litigation tied to federal dollars because we've got a collective bargaining agreement that is almost imposing what could be a disparate impact, particularly on the basis, as has been raised, on gender.
No, I mean, that narrative adds strength to my argument. So I could know that I'm stealing that from you, basically, to share that during the negotiation process, and I'll share this information with our labor commissioner because I think that would be helpful, and it would satisfy a lot of the grievances and the disputes we have, because on the one side, the way we look at it, you have, so if we're looking at Cub, it's basically a house divided because you have a new Cub member upset with a tenured Cub member for the same job. So, and you can't file grievance against grievance in an aspect like that, but your argument would help.
Well, and I'm not trying to upset the apple cart on collective bargaining. I'm a strong advocate for collective bargaining.
Oh, yes, sir.
I believe it's important. But I also recognize that in this instance, it has some interesting nuances that we're not quite sure what the implications could be for the city, which is our purview under Article 4.
Right.
And the reason we're raising it, and I think you're hearing the question, and I want to thank Commissioner Johnson for kind of honing in on it, is that when we're looking at a demographic where you're kind of top-heavy on potential folks who may retire, who may already be vested, when 51%, I think, 50 plus is what I saw from the deputy director's presentation, or 51 and older. Where are the opportunities when I think I heard currently 2,000 employees, but 2,800 is kind of your full complement?
Yes.
So you're down 800.
Right.
That's pretty significant when we're looking at some of the career progression opportunities and the gaps in terms of entry-level access. This thing just seems to have a number of dynamics that could be potentially problematic, and I would just kind of take the temperature of my colleagues of great concern to the commission that might warrant some follow-up conversation. So I just want to kind of put that out there so we can think about it now, if there's some ways that we can lend value to the conversations that are going on around the renegotiation of the contract.
No, you just have. No, thank you. Thank you. That'll be a part of the argument when we sit down for negotiations.
Right. Chief Kelly, will you make note of that concern for the record so that we can have a conversation with Director Moore about what might be the appropriate follow-up? Because I do know that contract negotiations and collective bargaining agreements are often very interesting interactions, shall we say.
Contentious
Right.
sometimes, yes.
And I've been on the union side leading some of the contention, right?
As I have been as well.
Right, you want to protect what's in the contract.
Right.
But for the mutual benefit of the process and the outcome, I think there are just some areas that we need to look at to make sure there's no legal risk. And if the CBA is the CBA, I think it's important to inform, as would be our responsibility, to advise the city council and the mayor that there are some concerns for which I think the law office might need to look into in terms of potential legal risk and exposure for the city.
Gotcha. No, very well said. Thank you, sir.
No, so I was just going to say, the two follow-up questions you both asked fit what I was going with. And my final point was going to be, does this conflict with current federal employment law?
Looks like it may.
Right. No, well, I mean, but it's the case. I mean, there are a couple of things you have to balance, because he referenced the Title VI. It's, anything that's attached to federal funds, you have to then abide by that rule.
Right.
And then there's age discrimination you also have to consider, though it typically applies to people 40 and over, which you have those individuals in your organization. So it sounds to me that there may be, and I don't know because I'm not a legal scholar, but there could be some language in your agreements that are legally invalid because you can't have local law that overrides federal law. So that was the end of that. So I think I'm good on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Foster, anything? I see you, Commissioner Evangelista. This is not me teaming up with my frat brothers because you chose to wear other colors. So it ain't personal, but let me put that out there. Commissioner Foster.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amal Foster. The question I have when it comes to diversity and inclusion, when we have some of the truck yards, garbage yards, the satellite offices at the dams, is there any effort to upgrade restrooms, locker rooms, shower facilities to accommodate persons based on their gender identity?
We can actually have our chief speak to that, our assistant.
I could talk a little bit about the funding aspect. So we have been working with the city's ARPA office to identify funding that could go into facility improvements, primarily in our solid waste facilities. And so that would go towards bathroom facility, those types of upgrades. We're still working out the details with that office right now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But it is being worked.
It is being discussed, yes, actively, yes.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Evangelista, any questions from you?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I'm Commissioner Evangelista. I just had one or two questions for the Chief Diversity Officer.
Dr. Merrick,
Marco Merrick, I'm here.
What-
I'm the Chief of the
Yes.
Office of Equity and Environmental Justice, Marco Merrick.
Yes. How are you, sir?
Great, thank you.
Great. I'm a big advocate of equity, civil rights, and inclusion as well. And I do have a follow-up question. You did state that besides anti-discrimination as well as anti-harassment training, do you provide any type of professional development for employees as it relates to diversity, inclusion, as well as cultural competencies, as well as multicultural competencies as well?
Sure, thank you for the question. Under the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice, I'm happy that we have actually, I inherited when I came to DPW 2 years ago, the Equity Committee, which is an entity and initiative that is enabled by the Equity Ordinance and under the auspices of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. And in DPW, of course, because we are a considerably large agency, we have an Equity Committee that is required to come together monthly. And what I've been able to do as we stood up in February of 2022 is equity change groups, which then is a subset of the Equity Committee. And in those groups, there are, because we meet as a larger committee and we have guest facilitators, and fortuitously, we met just last week, the Equity Committee, and we did it intentionally at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. And our guest facilitator, Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, who is also a part of ADR Vantage Group. And as we have these guest presenters come in, they do trainings, an array of them. Last week's training focused very specifically on equity across generations and how that speaks to an agency like ours with such a dynamic of ages that spanned 5 generations technically by design and by definition. And so forthcoming are other trainings. We've had trainings particularly, and I want to talk about leaning into the history of discrimination, of racism, of unfair practices that are not just around race, they are around gender, they are around sexual orientation, sexual identity. So the Equity Committee meetings, as much as they are meetings, they are educational opportunities. In those meetings and between those meetings, there are subsequent assignments that are given to our agency and to our equity change groups. The equity change groups, and I would say ideally, are no larger than 10 employees because it's hard to get folk to come together. You got 2,000 employees. You can't get everybody together on an agreed schedule. So to do it in small groups, and then the feedback, the report outs from those groups, and the metrics that we're looking at in terms of understanding, first of all, the baseline understanding of equity, what that looks like, what does diversity really look like, what does inclusion look like, and what does justice mean for us when we talk about internal. So our lens is very internal. It does not mean that we're not focused on the external work that we do, but as we talk about best in class in DPW, which is another one of our mantras, in order for us to maintain best in class and to aspire, it is aspirational too, we do it internally, introspectively, so that we're bringing best in class service to our customers and to ourselves and our community. But that's a long range and ongoing plan. I feel very supported by our director, who has encouraged me repeatedly that this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And as we are turning this ship in DPW and enabling a culture that understands diversity and equity in all we do, we are turning that ship slowly so that we don't turn it over. I hope that responds to you adequately.
It did. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I just have one quick question as well for the director. Mitchell, please.
He's on the phone.
Okay.
Yes, how you doing, sir?
You doing?
First, I want to thank you for your leadership in DPW. I just have a quick question for you. A lot of my constituents have issues with the inequities as it relates to resources in the city, particularly with trash eliminations, illegal dumpings that are occurring in certain neighborhoods, certain communities where it may not necessarily occur in other neighborhoods. How are you mitigating that situation to make it more equitable for everyone? That some communities are not being inundated with trash, illegal dumping everywhere, where other communities are constantly having trash removed, even workers actually cleaning up trash daily in their communities.
Director Mitchell, before you do that, Dr. Evangelista, I appreciate the question. I want to just make sure that the conversation that we've had up to now on staffing, did you have a presentation in terms of service delivery that you were going to present tonight in terms of equity and access? You do have a...
No, we don't, but we could come back and bring it
that's
up.
fine. I just wanted to make sure that if you had a presentation,
Yeah.
we didn't want to get ahead of it. So please go ahead if you're ready to answer the question. Thank you, Dr. Evangelista.
Thank you, Dr. Chair. And excellent question. In DPW, we looked at our service requests from an equitable. We do equity in all we do, and we look at it from an equitable standpoint. And so, how do we do our work? And we're just going to talk about blight and legal dumping in a sense, because that's where you see, a lot of complaints in many different areas about just a perpetual dumping in areas. The way we approach it in DPW is through what we call the 4 E's. The first E is equity. We want to provide equitable services. The second E is eradication. How do we eradicate? How do we support those residents? The third E is education. And how do we educate folks on programs that we have, like bulk trash pickups, our 5 drop-off centers, things like that will help eliminate blight. And then the last, when all those 3 things doesn't work, we talk about enforcement, right? And we have to really, really work with that. And so that's how we approach our work. When we're looking at illegal dumping, one of the things that Mayor Scott did just even recently, he uplifted the Clean Corps program, which really engaged community employment for folks within the community to clean and provide services for the community. That's done in partnership from an operational standpoint with a DPW. How that was selected, we looked at some of the most challenged areas based upon many different demographic groups, and we selected 15 neighborhoods that will provide services with the idea that it does a few things. Number one, it helps augment our services whereby people in the community that worked in the community that are getting opportunities in those communities. It alleviates our team from many instances for going out there. So now we can put our focuses on other parts of the city to provide not only reactive services, but proactive services in DPW, meaning I don't have to make a 311 request to get a service. They're proactively now going through some alleys, going through some hot spots, if you will, and being able to provide that services. Those programs will help us be able to shed more light on those areas. We also annually look at where our service requests are. Where do we get calls at? Where are the issues? And we recognize that there are certain locations that we just see constant complaints that we don't see in other locations. Some is because people from outside are coming out and dumping in the city. Some is, just to be quite frank, some people are dumping in their own communities. And so, our goal is to eliminate people from coming into Baltimore City and dumping. How we do that? Enforcement. Second goal is, how do we get folks from dumping in their own communities? Number one, educate. Some people just need a garbage can, right? And just call 311 and we'll deliver one to you. Some people need a bulk pickup because they need a mattress or a refrigerator picked up. And so you have the services free to you. Some people have a pickup truck and they can go to our 5 convenient drop-off centers for free. You can go twice a day if you want, and you can drop off any of your goods for free. So how do we get that? And that's where our education component is free, is critical. And so education is going to be our critical component, and that's communication. Many people don't know. Let's just be honest. So how do we deal with that? Well, that's our critical focus right now in DPW is comms. As you saw through the E. coli scare, one of the challenges that we had was comms, right? And you know, we take ownership of that, and now what we have to do is figure out how we improve it. So, what you saw this month is I think our third newsletter. More people will get that newsletter. What you have seen, if you paid your water utility bill recently, there's 3 questions that we ask. We ask for your email address, your phone number, and do you want to sign up for our newsletter? And we do that because what we're doing is trying to uplift our reach, just from a text and from an email standpoint. I think of now we're getting close to about 90,000 people that will get a newsletter next month. That's a bigger reach. And we also are working, especially after we come out of winters, and let me tell you, I'm from California, I love these winters. What we want to start popping up, what we call pop-ups. And our pop-ups meaning you don't have to come to us. We want to come up and pop up in your community and really be able to get services. Got a problem with the water bill? Well, we're going to pop up and we can fix that, right? I got a problem with services and blight in my community. Well, we're going to pop up and do that. But so those are critical in how we do equity. But I think last but not least, and this is going to be our Be More volunteer program and Be More Wise, and it's going to be a big launch during April 22nd during the Mayor's Spring Cleanup. We need volunteers. DPW cannot be the sole cleaner of Baltimore City. We need almost 600,000 residents to be just as caring at their neighborhood as we are of your neighborhoods. And without that level of engagement, some neighborhoods won't be clean. And that's just the honest truth, because we don't have enough people to just stand in front of someone's house and sweep the streets. So with equity is going to be a conscious effort on us to create some partnership, but a conscious sometimes effort for that community to really engage with us and we work together so that we can figure out solutions. And so we take that onus. But when we look at what we're doing, that's what we're doing. I think the Clean Corps program will get us further through proactive, because if you think about Clean Corps and that program that Mayor Scott rolled out, all of that work will be proactive. Cleaning alleys, cleaning up vacant properties, making sure corner cans doesn't overflow. And when it's too much for them to pick up, we'll be bringing in our big old loader trucks and our backhoes and our little bobcats to help them out so that we can create those. And if this is a model for success, then we can expand that out through all of Baltimore. But more importantly, it really gives us and our crews less effort in those areas, and then we can put focus on other areas in doing that proactive work. And that's how we're going to get to more equitable solutions, and that's what we're working towards.
Thank you.
Director Mitchell, while you're there,
All right.
because I want to pick up on a couple of things, and then Dr. Merrick, I'll come back to you in a minute about something in your college level outreach that you mentioned in your remarks. So if we're looking at a deficit of about 800 people, give me an idea of what that looks like in terms of the position distribution. What types of jobs are covered in that 800?
All right. So I know we got our HR folks and they have a list of positions, but if I'm just focusing, and I'm going to focus on some key areas, but there's a lot of areas that we can focus on. When I look at solid waste, that key areas is commercial driver's license. I need more people with a Class B and a Class A license. Why is that important? Well, if I don't have those individuals, I can't sweep a street because I need a commercial driver. I can't drive a garbage truck because I need a commercial license, right? And those are all critical things that deal with blight. For every driver I don't have a crew that I can push out on the street, if that makes sense. And so for our solid waste program, that is one of the most critical positions that we have. When we're looking at maintaining our water treatment plants and our water processing plants, and those 5 assets, what's critical is operators, right? We need operators to be able to operate. We need lab techs so that we can ensure that we can monitor and process those waters. We need, maintenance mechanics and electricians to do that work. And that's critical for us to fill that vacancy. But I just want to say that is not a DPW issue. This is a national issue. Right? I can go anywhere in the country and they're going to say the same thing that I'm saying to you right now. Yeah. And so what are we doing here? It's led by our deputy director and our chief administrative officer, Mata. We're looking at doing a full comprehensive study on DHR with our Department of Human Resources. And now I'm going to say looking, we're getting close to completing that. And what does that do? We have to be more competitive. If I pay $20 here and I go to WSSC down the road and they're paying $30, it's going to be hard for us to get the talent. So we have to make sure that we're more competitive. Right, and if we're more competitive, we can pull some talent into Baltimore and we can reduce the vacancies. But it's just not a vacant position, right? We need to make sure that we're training people up so that they want to do this work. Google is sexy now, right? Driving Amazon is sexy now. Doing a lot of at-home work is sexy right now, especially for these younger folks. My son doesn't want to do any work. He loves working at home on his computer, and there's a lot of people like to do that work. And this work, right, working on the back of a Packer truck, right, working in a treatment plant is not as sexy. So we want to grab those folks that are interested in those work really, really early. And so programs such as our Be More Wise program, which is an apprenticeship program, our YH2O program, which is another apprenticeship program, where we're engaging people as they're coming out of high school, are engaging people as they're getting re-entered back into wanting to do some work, are engaging the people that are underemployed and really getting them the skill sets, right? Give them the experience and give them the opportunity. Because there's a lot of people, I'm a young kid from East Oakland, right? I didn't know anything about water and utilities as a young kid. There's a lot of folks in Baltimore that doesn't know a lot about this work as well. But once you get to know it, this is an industry that's everywhere throughout the world. We don't work without these utilities. So we can get the young folks to really understand this industry, the potential of this industry, and that this industry will never go away. If you know this work, you always have a job. And that's what our goal is to do. And that's where our apprenticeship program is going, is really getting those folks to understand this. And we're opening a lot of folks' eyes and I think in our Be More Wise program, I think we have 11 or so people right now. Our YHCO this year, we graduated about 23 people, I think. And those are all folks that's going to get some full-time employment. And so we're excited about that work. But it's long work. It's not going to be overnight, but we're scooping one shovel at a time.
So how many of those positions that you mentioned, all right, CDLs, operators, lab techs, maintenance mechanics, electricians, how many of those positions require a degree?
I don't think any of them. Yeah, I don't believe any of them requires a degree.
And the reason I asked that, because I appreciate Dr. Merrick's highlighting of the relationships that are built with the School of Health Policy, the School of Engineering, the School of Science and Tech between Morgan State and Coppin State, respectively. I would encourage maybe a bit of conversation and outreach to Baltimore City Community College.
Yeah.
That the strategic partnerships, as we look at the national models, that I didn't hear the community college mentioned.
Yeah.
With a deficit of 800 positions is pretty significant. So there's some opportunities there, particularly when we're trying to get more gender inclusivity.
I was actually thinking Out for Justice.
Out for Justice.
I was thinking
Keep going.
Civic Works. I was thinking a lot of our returning citizen and our mama's returning citizen programs would be excellent sources. There are a lot of women who are returning from incarceration that are looking for jobs and are looking for jobs that are paying them living wages that would allow them to support their families, that they could work during the day and be home to be with their families in the evenings. And I think these would be the types of jobs, and giving them ways of promotion, long term would be a way for a lot of them. And I think, and without needing a degree. And most of us, because we take care of our families, have licenses and would be willing to get CDL licenses. I have mine.
I need mine.
See, you got a recruit already. You
I
didn't
stay
even
with
know.
Yeah, come on over.
I think that's pretty critical. So I wanted to highlight that. And then I think it was maybe on, and thank you, Director Mitchell, and maybe someone else on the team. In the presentation, I saw a highlight that there were only 11 complaints from DPW since about 2012 that came to the CRC. I would just ask you to go back and check your numbers. Our numbers are quite different than what's in that presentation. As a matter of fact, from what was provided to the commissioners for this hearing, the numbers we're looking at from 2013 to date is about 29.
Those were the numbers I believe were provided to us
By whom?
by the CRC, if I'm correct. Yeah.
All right, so let's confirm those. And then the other piece is, I think I heard Dr. Merrick went into some detail about the EEO process internally.
Yeah.
Dr. Merrick, to your knowledge, do any of those internal numbers get reported back up by way of confirmation to the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, or is it just kind of kept internally?
We don't have a reporting system to that office. They've not required that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I mean, it may just by way of information, not that we're trying to impose anything. It might
We
be
could
good
do
to make
that.
sure we got some coordination there, and
That's
see
fine.
if we can get better on those numbers. So thank you.
Okay.
I do have, Commissioner Foster, Foster, do you have anything? Because I saw you leaning.
Yes, sir. For Director Mitchell, you mentioned apprenticeship program and, building partners with the local colleges or community colleges. I had thought Mergenthaler had certain career tracks. CDL would be a perfect career track because, let's be honest, every kid doesn't want to go to college.
Correct.
So I think that would just be a suggestion to also partner with the Baltimore City Public School System and maybe look at, exploring that avenue.
Absolutely. And I do take, all the information from the organizations you all shared seriously, and we want to get those names because we want to make sure that we're reaching out to as wide a net that we can so that we can recruit folks to come into our department because we have much need, as you all see, and there's a lot of opportunity, and we want to hire from Baltimore. That's our goal. So, I appreciate that, and we'll definitely put that into our portfolio.
Yes, sir.
Just to add on to that, I had written vocational technical schools, so you cover that with the schools. I was going to say nonprofits, just because I know, like Empower Baltimore is just kind of, Empower is like one of them that I think of that's doing a lot of work with the kids, trying to, entrepreneurship and just other ways to kind of redirect their energy in a much more productive way. So you may find a number of nonprofits that's already working with youth that may be able to, that are looking for ways to get the youth involved in more employment opportunities, could team up with you and maybe take on a lot of the work with proper, preparing them and sort of delivering you a candidate that's ready for you to place. So that could be a great partnership as well.
Yeah, and that's excellent, and thank you for that. I know we have partnered with some, a lot of our Be More Wise and our YHUO graduates and folks that are going through their cohort are coming from some of the nonprofit. I actually went out and did some recruiting myself. But if you all know of, I'm still new to Baltimore, if you will, organizations, please share it with us so that we can make sure that we're doing the proper outreach.
Along those lines, and I didn't hear, but I would be shocked if there wasn't some communication with MOED, the mayor's office.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, Director Perkins Coleman is one of our bigger partners in what we do.
He might be a good starting point in terms of an inroads, particularly to Baltimore City Community College. I know at one point he was a designee to the Board of Trustees. So you may want to just kind of follow up with him to see where that is. But I want to kind of pivot to a couple of things that are not quite in the employment discrimination range, but I think are important to understanding the work of the department. In Deputy Director Luna's statistics, Your operating budget about 660, your capital budget about 330 million. I would imagine there's quite a bit of procurement that goes through DPW. What does your MBE participation look like in terms of numbers and dollar value of contracts, if you have it?
Thank you, Chair, for that question. So we have those numbers based off of last fiscal year, so fiscal year
That's fine.
2022 ending. 44.12% participation with minority utilization. Those are minority firms. As far as dollar amounts go, that's a total of about $62 million for capital projects.
And when I looked at the website last night, I think I saw for contracts valued at $50,000 or more, you have to be pre-qualified. But then I saw something that said the office or maybe the department that handles that was not operating due to COVID. I'm not sure if that's current. What's the state of the pre-qualification process, and how did you get that information out for MBE businesses that want to do work with DPW?
Yeah, so we do a lot of outreach through our Office of Boards and Commissions. That office is active, so they do regularly meet. There is a separate committee that I sit on that also goes through and evaluates the local firms and qualifies them before their information is submitted over to the boards of estimates. And they do a lot of outreach. They staff in that agency work on a small business development program, and so they actually bring in cohorts to go and talk about the process, how do you get qualified, walk them through the steps, making sure that they're getting the training that they need in order so that they can successfully bid for projects.
Good. All right. Thank you. And then while you're there, and my colleagues can feel free to double back if they need to, I know that BH2O is now water for all in terms of equitable access and relief in terms of the water bill. Can you give us a sense of the overview of how well that program is working and where there may be any gaps or needs that you think need to be addressed in terms of water access in the city?
Yeah, so we partner with the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Services for Water for All. So just to give you the overview of how the process works. So we do the outreach, and they also partner with us in terms of doing outreach. And then anybody who's applying for the program would apply directly through the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Services. And so to date, just looking at their statistics, we've had about 6,000 total applications that office had received. Total approved applications is just over 2,000, and total dollars that have been awarded so far through Water for All is about $1.8 million.
Do you have any idea of the 4,000 or so who aren't approved, what a general range of reasons why?
It varies just based off of the application. So we've had that same conversation with the staff that works over in the mayor's office. Sometimes it's just missing documentation. And so if they're not submitting a completed packet of information, because income has to be verified through the application process, because that's one of the requirements. It could just be missing documentation, so they have to go back, connect with the resident to make sure that they submit a completed application.
And they're allowed to resubmit?
Yes.
I am curious, because I feel like sometimes we make programs that are designed to help people. The very nature of how we set up the requirements or the process for people to apply becomes a barrier in and of itself. Have you received any feedback from any of the applicants to the program about some of the challenges, or are you finding, like you mentioned, that there's a recurrent theme around missing pieces of information? And with 4,000, the majority of the applicants, falling into that category, are you finding, does that present an opportunity for you all to go back and reevaluate and see if we are creating more access challenges than we need to create?
So some of those direct points of conversation between the people that applied and then the application process, I have to defer that over to that office, just because they're the ones that are directly communicating with residents. I think just In those conversations, as we worked with them to see, what other support they need from the agency, sometimes it's just staffing as well too. We fund 6 positions in that office to work on this effort, and so we've been talking with them too to see how else we can support them. And those conversations have started recently, and they're just going to be ongoing for now.
No, and I understand that, and I understand your response. I guess considering that you all apply equity in everything that you do, that was part of your, how you all sort of presented everything to us. To me, it seems that it then gives you a responsibility to dig a little deeper around that from an equity lens.
Yeah. And so one of the things I would highlight too.
I'm just mentioning it.
I was going to highlight that we actually just brought in our acting chief over that office that's going to be working directly with community groups to engage with them directly. And if for any of those type of questions, I can refer over to Mr. Mills.
And we're chomping at the bit. Again, it's Marco Merrick, the Chief of Equity and Environmental Justice. We do have our Acting Chief of Water Advocacy and Customer Appeals, and the things that you're talking about are absolutely equity issues. And so looking at how folk access our programs and the kind of barriers that come before them, often there are systems that are put in place and issues around equity and access and who's applying. And what is a barrier for them being able to do that if they can't get to a facility or they don't have, we create a lot of things now, everything's online. Right. We have individuals who want to do that and they don't have access to that. So, Mr. Mills, if you want to come and share, because he actually, on a regular basis, we've established a rhythm with the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, the Environmental Control Board, and the Water Advocacy, Right to Water in Baltimore. We're doing that so that we address these matters, and we are absolutely applying equity in all we do. So,
all right, and just to add one thing to that, I mean, if the income verification is a requirement, what happens if the person doesn't have income? Just wondering if there are different things that we're doing to prevent people from getting what we created for them.
So good evening. My name is Mills. It's R. Anthony Mills. I am the acting chief of the Office of Water Advocacy and Customer Appeals. To respond to your question, the 2 most important points in terms of potential barriers. One is access for our elder or older residents. And so the director of that program and I have been discussing ways to mitigate that in terms of technology access as well as paper. Some of the lag in terms of the submission that you asked about, the 4,000, some of those are paper applications. So what happens is when a resident goes into a community action center, they work with about 30 minutes with a staff person to complete that application, and then it gets submitted. Out of the 4 to 5 people that do this, they see about they see about 32 people, I believe it is, a day, 30 minutes each, just churning out the applications. They're understaffed. So that if you talk about, and that's the mayor's office of Children and Family Services. This is coming from their information. So they are going through an interview process now to hire permanent staff. Right now they're working with temporary staff. The other challenge for them is documentation and completing the application. When a resident completes the application or submits the application, they then work with the staff to fill in the blanks. They receive daily email notifications and text messages to inform them that the application is not complete and what's missing. And weekly, if it's just a matter of the W-9 form being completed, they're reminded of that weekly. As you may know, there's some legislation potentially pending in Annapolis related to the grant funds or the subsidy that comes as a result of this program, because it is taxable. And so there are some who don't sign the W-9 because they don't want that responsibility. And so if that legislation passes, we suspect that those individuals then would be more than willing to sign that document. So those are the 3 primary reasons right now that some of this is moving slower, as was just mentioned. There are in excess of 6,000 applications submitted, and about 2,000 to 3,000 that are in process of being completed. So, Brother Mills, along those lines, because there is a staffing shortage, process times are long, for customers who are not able to meet their water bill, how vulnerable are they to having service interrupted while they're waiting on their process to complete?
And so I've been asking that question, actually. That's one of the questions I've asked. And so, so there's a difference in terms of process for the tenant and the homeowner. If it's a tenant, then the tenant working through the landlord would then have to address that issue because the landlord is the homeowner. And so depending on whose name that is in, so there's a number of issues. And then in terms of homeowners, there's a process that homeowners follow. And for most of them, they are able to resolve those issues, or they go through an appeals process where they do that. Yes.
And thank you for that, Mr. Mills. And I want to answer the question directly as well, that there's no immediate look at showing up in anyone's water. So those folks that are going, no matter their age, no matter their demographics, as they go through their process, there will be no disruption of service to those households.
How is that notated to make sure that there's no disruption? If some of these are electronic apps, some of these are on paper, we got a staffing shortage, how confident are you that you're current on whose service should not be interrupted while these applications are being processed?
I am 100% confident because since COVID, we haven't implemented our shut-off program. So citywide, we have not implemented a shut-off of any services for any Baltimore City residents. We work with them through this program, Water for All program, through our LIWAP program, low-income housing affordability, water affordability program. We have our Promise Pay program, where it's ways for people to pay through payment plans and different things of that nature. So what we're doing is we're working with our customers to get current. We also working with the state. We put an application and grant in application in so that we can get some of those funds that give folks credits that have had challenges during the COVID pandemic. So we're working with our clients in so many different ways to get them into the right program for their water bill without having service disruptions.
And just for the record, your announcement that there's no current service disruption plan since COVID, that's not an invitation for folks who are able to pay their bill not to pay their bill. Is that right?
Absolutely not.
I just wanted to make sure, because sometimes that message comes across a little bit different.
They may get a different message eventually too as well.
Make sure it's current. Because we are on Charm TV, and depending on who has access, it might be a good time if there is if there's information in terms of a contact number for folks who may have some of the challenges, Dr. Merrick, that you mentioned in terms of accessibility. Is there a phone number that you'd like to share for folks who may have a need to reach out to Water for All? And if you're not sure of the number, I have the flyer here, but I think it's a good public service announcement for somebody to make it, or I'm happy to read it based on what I found online. Okay. So for persons who are looking to apply for Water for All, and understand or get more information about the program, the phone number to call is 410-396-5555, 410-396-5555. So we are glad to hear about the program, and if there are other ways that we can help with getting that information out, please let us know. Madam Secretary, any questions from you?
Yes, sir. All right. Not sure which of you would like to answer this one. Most of mine are related to the community, and there are community concerns that I have gathered over the past few weeks. So the first one is related to recycling. Due to the pandemic and pandemic protocols, the recycling pickups were reduced, right? We were at 2 and now we're at 1. They were reduced to accommodate the reductions in staffing shortage. And clearly hearing that you're 800 people short, that may be the case for a little bit longer. But I've been hearing from constituents that, this once or twice a month pickup, depending on where they are, is not enough. What are the plans to step that back up, especially in, in the city, in the long run? What are the plans to better improve the recycling infrastructure overall, to make sure that more people recycle, and so that we have less solid waste and more recycled waste?
Absolutely. Those are excellent questions. I appreciate them. I'm going to try to answer it in different chunks. So if I forget something, just remind me, and I'll get to the answer. First, I want to bifurcate garbage from recycling, just so everyone who's listening understands. We provide a weekly garbage service to Baltimore City residents, and over the last year or so, those services has not been disrupted, and we've been, I think, at 99.9% accurate in those routes, and we're excited about that. Nearly a year ago, I would say about 14 months ago, we had some significant staffing challenges, and as a result of those staffing challenges, we had to move our recycling from weekly to biweekly. But it's not just the result of staffing. We rolled out, we had about 41,000 yellow containers citywide, and we rolled out about 170,000 containers. So as you can imagine, there's a lot more people participating. So not only with the staff shortage, but more people participating in the program, it lent for some very significant service disruptions about this time last year. About January of last year, we went to biweekly service because with the staffing levels and more cans to pick up, we went to a model that our current, staff and equipment can support, and that was a biweekly model. We recognize that we have to get back to weekly as soon as possible. I'm going to talk about what we're doing there to get there, but I also want to talk about even over the last year. I do want to thank the folks from DPW that's working day to day. Even with the biweekly services, our crews are working on average 11.6 hours a day. So think about that, almost half of the day picking up recycling, because so much of Baltimore is using that, and we're excited about that. But it is a lot on our staff. And even with that, they've collected recycling this past year in 2022. I think they missed 3 routes, and that was 99.99% of the time. So even though it's not weekly, the biweekly pickups, it should be happening at your home. And it's taking a lot out of our folks to get that done with those type of hours, as you can imagine, on the back of those trucks during different weather. That's a lot of work, and it's tough work. So what are we doing? The mayor has supported us in purchasing 67 new vehicles. 50 of those vehicles are what we call our low packer trucks. Those are garbage truck. So there was a $16 million investment in new equipment. The mayor is working currently on some staff incentives that hopefully we can talk about next month, as well as really looking at salaries and wages so that we can be more competitive. So with all that new equipment and a larger team and filling those vacancies, we can get there. I think one of the big challenges that we're facing is a garbage truck has taken us 2.5 to 3 years to get. We started the process of ordering trucks in November of 2021. The PO was released, I think, in March or so of 2022. We're about a year out, and we're still waiting for trucks. And right now, with the supply chain, you're looking at 2.5 or plus years to get a garbage truck. It takes about a year just to get a normal car. So a customized garbage truck, it takes a little bit more. We also have been reaching out to contractors to see about some support to get us to weekly. So we've been doing a lot of things to do that. We had a Rubicon report that did a full assessment on where we are, where we're going, and our plan to get there, and we're working hard to get there. I think our critical point is going to be when those trucks can get on the lot. Once we get that, we believe that with additional staff and hiring the staff, that we can get to weekly as soon as possible, but it's going to take some time for those trucks to get there. Our goal is to really uplift a few things, and this is where our education piece is really important is that we have 14 drop-off centers that folks can have. So if you are experiencing overflow between those 2 weeks that you get trash, we have 14 locations that you can do, and we can share that later. I don't have the addresses with me, but that is critical. You can drop off as much as you want when you want at those locations when they're open. But I also want to let our citizens know that even bi-weekly, our crews have no limit on what you can put out for recycling. And so we look to pick all that up. And we know that that's not enough. We know Baltimore expect more, and we know that we have a duty to get to weekly. But we have some what we call external limitations that we're working through to ensure that we provide that level of service. And we have a task force now working with DGS, our budget office, the mayor's office, the city administrator's office, to really do a comprehensive approach to how we solve it. And it's not just, fixing and getting it weekly, how we communicate, how do we let folks know about these programs, what they can expect going forward. And so we're working on doing a comprehensive message on that as well.
Thank you.
Hopefully I answered all the questions.
You did, and I would like you to know that 2.5 years to get a truck is less time than I've heard from transportation to get a bus.
Yeah, it's
So and it's not just the requisitions and that, it's the, like you said, to get it custom to what you need, all of that with the supply chain.
and I want to add to that, Baltimore City has custom garbage trucks. So if you look at our trucks compared to Waste Management, they're slimmer and higher. So your normal Waste Management, our Republic truck, the blue one you see out there from other companies, they're 25 cubic yard trucks. Those are standard, right? So you can get those a little bit quicker. We have custom-made trucks, especially made that can fit through Baltimore City's alley, because 61% of our routes are done in alleyways. So we have 16-yard cubic packer that can't be longer or wider than 7.5 feet. And so when we're talking about, there's only 2 locations, local municipalities that I know that does that, and that's us in DC. And so and DC is moving more and more out of it as they build out their infrastructure. So when we order the trucks, it's only us in DC in the whole country that are ordering these trucks. So, they have to slow down the assembly line and do things. So, and people say, why does it take so long? Because we're pretty much ordering custom vehicles that slows down the production process.
So I would say with your communications, as you mentioned before, to add some of that language even to the communications of what goes out to the public with encouraging recycling, but then also explaining with why the recycling is the way it is important for the citizens of Baltimore City. So, but this also leads me to another question. So you separated, and I appreciated it, the garbage from the recycling in your response. And so this takes me back to garbage cans, but not the garbage cans for personal, but the garbage cans on the streets.
Yeah.
In some neighborhoods in Baltimore City, and I'm not just talking about lower income neighborhoods or what have you, literally just some neighborhoods in Baltimore City, there is a large distance between where you can find a garbage can on the corner. My son and I, we walk, we run through neighborhoods, and there was one day where I was on 33rd Street by the Y, and we went from 33rd Street by the Y, about a 15-block radius, past Mervo High School, which was mentioned, up towards Morgan, in that whole general direction, and did not pass one single trash can on a street corner in a 15-block area, not one single trash can. And we were literally carrying trash, and we were carrying coffee cups. We had plastic bag in our hand. We put them in that plastic bag, and we started at one point just picking up our own trash because we were like, this is ridiculous. There is no trash can, and now we're seeing trash, and we're understanding why there's trash on the ground, because there is nowhere to throw trash. We were passing bus stops. There were no trash cans at the bus stops.
Absolutely.
And this was in a neighborhood that is, a quote unquote better area, right? An area where there are people living, where there are bus stops, and you fast forward that to other areas of Baltimore City where it already looks like neighborhood blight, and there also are no trash cans around for people to put their trash.
Yeah.
What are you doing in terms of those types of, areas so that people can clean up? When you have issues, as was mentioned before, where people don't throw out trash properly, and there are no places for them to throw that trash,
Yeah.
how do we deal with that?
That's a great question, and this is a question that I think everywhere I went in the country is being asked. The question is, do I have a corner litter can or not, right? And how useful is it or not? And you have many debates on it. The first debate is when I see a corner can, depending on where it's at, the idea is for litter, bag of chips, a candy bar wrapper, soda can to go in the trash can, right? But what you see sometimes is people putting other things outside of that. You'll see next to it a bag of, a big bag of garbage, and sometimes in certain communities, they elect not to have them because they attract more blight sometimes, right? Because people aren't utilizing them just for litter, they're utilizing them for other purposes. And then you have some in areas where you say they are needed by bus stops and other locations that where people, where they stand because they're waiting and they have something, they want to dispose of it, and they need proper receptacles, right? And so for us, to be honest, we haven't taken on that challenge yet in DPW. Because we've been taking on the challenge of just, getting services. So as you can imagine, a year and a half ago, we didn't have street sweeping going. A year and a half ago, we weren't picking up corner cans properly. You know that. We didn't have bulk pickup. We didn't have graffiti. We didn't have a lot of those service deliveries just 18 months ago. So our goal and our focus has been getting to balance and getting those services that Baltimore City folks residents expected before the pandemic, getting them back as stable as possible. And then we eventually will turn our attention to that approach. But be honest, as you can see, we've been dealing with a lot of challenges with just filling trucks, getting folks licenses, that we haven't truly put a big focus on that. But it is something that we are looking at as part of our blight remediation plan. But it just, there was some other priorities that we really focused on over the last year, and we just haven't had a chance to put a lot of energy into it, and that's the honest answer.
Mm-hmm. And the only reason I point those out is because it contributes to the blight, and it contributes to the rats and, the rat remediation and the being proactive, right? And it also, the disproportionate impact when we look at the downtown areas and the fact that there are newer and newer trash cans and recycling bins downtown when there were already there, and we see brand new ones popping up when in our neighborhoods and our communities throughout the city they're not there.
No, yeah, and when we look at our business improvement districts, some of that is done by the downtown bid and is not done by Public Works, and so they offer a different level of service sometimes than we do in some communities. I can tell you over the last year, or I think about the last year, what we have done is through our Rubicon, we're moving all of our routes and we're moving all of our assets digitally. Mm-hmm. So what we have done is for all, say, 6,000 corner cans that we have, we're putting them in our GIS asset management system, and we're creating what we call routes, so that you can have a phone in your truck, and you go from can to can, based upon that route. Once we finalize that, then we'll look at our routes and say which ones are big, which ones are short, and we'll begin to try to balance those out. And where we can and where we see needs, have the opportunity to add more to those routes. And so that's the work that's started, and that's where we're going with that work once we have all that done. And that's what's part of the effort that we had with Rubicon.
Thank you. Just have one last question. I know that it's been a while since the last strategic plan, and that you all are now doing your open town halls and everything for the current strategic plan, that you're at like 60%, and so you're now opening it up for questions. That there's one concurrent to this, I believe, like an open house or a town hall for concurrent to this. So I saw the information about it coming from the council people, but can you or someone from your staff, because we are on Charm TV right now, is there a phone number or a website that can be named so that others that are watching it on TV right now can be aware of how they can tune in for future town halls to make sure that they're aware of when the strategic plan, the next time it's going to be discussed, so that they can be a part of it?
Yes, ma'am. That's a 10-year solid waste plan, correct?
Yes.
Deputy Director Luna has his laptop in front of him. He definitely can provide that information.
So I think the best opportunity for the public, if you go to publicworks.baltimorecity.gov, and the information is there on our website. That's our landing page. But you are correct. There is a concurrent virtual meeting that's happening right now on the 10-year solid waste plan, and then just to highlight it as well, the next opportunity for the public to comment on that is March 13th at 2:00, and that one will also be a virtual meeting. And then we'll have 3 other meetings planned after that.
And are any of them in person, or are they all online?
Now, the first 3 are going to be virtual, and then we'll have 2 in person. The first date for the in-person is April 10th, and the location is still to be determined. We're working with a couple different partners to maximize that space.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Foster?
Yes, sir. I wanted to piggyback on Dr. Finnegan's question related to the recycle is now done bi-weekly. And I do remember when my home garbage was actually picked up twice a week.
Yes.
With those changes, obviously challenged by staff and COVID, how has that affected calls related to rat abatement, particularly in some of the more challenging areas of the city?
I don't have someone from solid waste with us, but when I look at our performance matrix and our KPIs, key performance indicators for the public that may not know that jargon, we addressed 99% of our work orders that we received, and I believe that there's over 30,000 work orders that we received last year. So I would have to get back to this committee on where do we see a spike or not. I can tell you, what goes in a recycling can is a lot different than what goes in your normal traditional garbage can. So when you're looking at recycling and cardboard, and you're looking at paper, you're looking at aluminums and different things of that nature, that doesn't attract it. It's when you do not pick up your garbage, and folks, they jump in and go open up bags, and all heck break loose, right? So I haven't, as a director, heard a lot more about any complaints, just from a director standpoint and receiving emails. But I would have to get back to this committee to give you exact numbers on where we're at and how we're performing related to that.
Yes, sir. And lastly, barring a traffic accident or mechanical breakdown, what is the average life expectancy of a garbage truck?
You want to replace them every 7 to 8 years. And the reason why our garbage trucks are on average on the road four days a week. And as we mentioned, leaving the yard, coming back, you're talking about almost 12 hours a day. And so that's a lot of work on the trucks themselves. So you don't want to go any more than 7 or 8 years. After that, the failures become very costly, and you want to have a replacement. And that's what we're working through now with DGS. It's not just the purchase of these 67 vehicles, it's what is our replacement strategy, so we never have to purchase a big bucket of vehicles, that we have them coming every year, understanding that these are customized vehicles. You don't want to wait, because we know it takes time for that lead time for us to get them. So every year we want to always be in a queue purchasing vehicles. So once we catch up, we will have a better cadence for going forward.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Johnson?
No further questions.
Commissioner Evangelista?
No further questions.
I now want to kind of move to the consent decree. I saw an alert come up yesterday that the public comment period has been extended as it relates to the Phase 2 portion. And Director Mitchell, if you can just kind of give an overview of that process and the opportunities to participate, and then more particularly, in the Phase 2 report, at page number 10, starting at the bottom, there's a particular reference to contractor and procurement capacity being of particular impact on the implementation of Phase 2. We had some conversation earlier about procurement and opportunities and kind of creating these pipelines, and it sounds like there's some specializations that might be required as it deals with, solid sewer overflow.
Correct.
So if you can kind of speak to that. And then the third thing is, are you seeing the SSO incidents disproportionately impacting certain communities versus others in Baltimore City?
Appreciate those questions.
In whatever order you want to take them, feel free.
I'm going to start with the first one, and if I forget something, just remind me. So I want to just speak to Phase 1 of our consent order, and so for folks in the public that are not aware, Baltimore City was challenged a few decades ago. I think in 2002 we entered into what we call a consent decree, and that the consent decree was mainly implemented to do one main thing, is to ensure that wastewater is not going into our water streams and entering the bay, so that we can improve water quality throughout not just Baltimore City, but throughout this region. And so we embarked in 2002 into a Phase 1 of consent decree. That consent decree was very much focused on what we call capital improvements. That's where you see our Head Works project, that's at Back River Treatment Plant. That's where you see an upgrade of many what we call our pump stations that pumps our wastewater throughout our system so that they can get treated. But you also see a lot of what we call in our distribution system updating our old sewer lines. We have lines that are over a century old. And so our goal in that process was to upgrade our system so that we can reduce what we call sanitary sewer overflows. That means water discharging from our system into someone's basement or into our storm inlets into a creek or waterway. And so we spent about $1.6 billion in Phase 1 when we completed most of all of those projects. And then what you see in Phase 2 of the consent decree that's being talked about is our plan for the next 7+ years in order to keep doing that work. What you see in that plan is a plan that estimated the cost will be about $210,000 or $1 million, which is 80-90% reduction to what you saw in the prior plan. We're pivoting from a capital-intensive, process to reduce SSOs into a very maintenance and operation-intensive. Meaning we're not spending another, $500 million on the Head Works projects. We're going to spend $5 million to clean the line, right, to make sure that it's operating so that we can inspect the line and see if it's in good or bad shape. And with the idea of what we want to do is remove what we want grease out of the line. We want to remove roots out of the line. We want to remove protruding laterals so that it doesn't cause SSO. Sometimes it's not capacity of the line, it's the line just needs to be cleaned and inspected. And so we're transitioning to a more maintenance intensive where we inspect that line, clean that line, and then when we see issues, we surgically do capital improvements instead of just repairing the whole sub-basin. Right, we may only repair 4 or 5 lines in that basin because that's going to be the best prudent of the dollars. The reason why that's the focus of DPW is because we want to keep rates from going up 10% a year for 25 years, right? We want to be able to manage those costs so that we can keep rate increases reasonable. As you all are aware, that for this year and the next 2 years, that rates have increased as it decreased, 70% from the average of the last 24 years. And it's because of programs like this trying to, focus our capital program so that we can reduce the cost of borrowing. And when we reduce that, it reduce the cost of maintaining that asset, would then reduce the amount of increase we have to push down to our customers. And so that's critical. So we're really focusing not only on the objective of reducing I&I inflow and infiltration in our system and SSOs for wastewater going into our waterways and our basements, we also are thinking about folks' pocketbook, right? Because we don't want people to decide on, am I going to be able to feed my child or am I going to be able to get a clean glass of water? We want the folks to feel comfortable knowing they can do both. And so we have to keep those affordable, and we got to get folks into the programs we talked about just a few moments ago. When we look at equity on how our sewer line works, the system is built in a sense, in a way where it's not so much a good neighborhood or a bad neighborhood. It's more of, do we have newer infrastructure or older infrastructure, right? Do we have large development, whereas more sewage is going into that pipe, and now we have capacity issues? So from an equity standpoint, infrastructure has no bounds, right? And what we're seeing is where we see overflows is not so much of the neighborhood, is where the design was, centuries ago, and that's hitting every neighborhood, right? Very well-to-do neighborhoods and some not. So these overflows are not discriminating, if you will. So what we see in the system is happening everywhere. But what we have saw over since we introduced Headworks and many of the projects that we have completed is that we see a 93% reduction in what we call SSO value. So if you think 20 years ago, we'll have 240 million gallons of sewage that leaves our system and goes into our water body. I think last year, and I can get the report, was about 6 million gallons. That was because of the hard work and to the contribution of our utility customers to get us to that point. Now we have what we call diminishing returns. How much do we spend to get the last, 10%, if you will? And what we want to do is be prudent in how we spend our money to do that, because again, we are thinking about our ratepayers. So when we look at that, that's critical. I think I answered 2 of the 3 questions.
Before you go to the third one, because I got a quick follow-up.
Yep.
So if the SSO challenge is indiscriminate, so to speak, I think that's the term you use, prioritizing which project gets taken on first obviously has some analysis to it, but does it then lead to the potential that there's some disparity in terms of which neighborhood gets attention first?
Yep.
Versus another neighborhood? So while I hear that we've got this citywide issue, but we have some capacity issues, right? Both in terms of staffing, resources, you kind of run it down. How do you figure out where you start first based on the age of the system if some of these neighborhoods that were more original have changed in terms of their demography over time? So back then when the sewage system was first put in,
Yep.
they appeared one way.
Mm-hmm.
And a century later, they appear a different way.
Yep.
Are we prioritizing by age, or is there something else going on that might cause us to have some other concerns?
Whew. All right, Doc, Reverend, Chair. I didn't know I was coming for this kind of heat. But I want to answer the question, though.
And here's why I raise it, right? Because you all are, as we say, on the front lines of trying to get this done. Because we have a responsibility under the city code, some of it has to do with health, environment. You have an Office of Equity and Environmental Justice. Your chief is here. I mean, these are important conversations, and they go to the broader issue. And we got to put it out here.
Yeah.
In a city that is 60% black,
Yep.
we cannot avoid the obvious issue in the room.
Yep.
The black butterfly may not just be a black butterfly for the way we talk about it, if it is in terms of how we procure and utilize public resources.
Absolutely.
We need to have that discussion, which is why, and it's not to put you on the spot, but Public Works, y'all got $1 billion worth of stuff going
Absolutely.
through the budget every year. A lot of focus is on policing, but I think some of the bigger issues when we start looking at quality of life issues may actually be more appropriate to talk about what's going on in Public Works and in housing and some of these more fundamental areas so that we can get more balance in terms of this broader conversation. So I wanted to kind of set that context because it's not targeted at you.
Yeah, yeah.
You just happen to be, look.
I'm ready.
You in the seat, so welcome to the conversation.
No, and I appreciate that, and I think that those are excellent questions. I'm gonna answer it in two ways, and then I'm gonna answer your third one and pivot to that as well. The way we look at our capital project, we prioritize it, number one, based on equity. That's one of the things that is in our capital improvement, and that's how we rate our projects. But also what we do is health and safety, urgency of it. The way we have our wastewater model, we have what we call a hydraulic model. So we have engineers that watch how the flow works and where our challenges are. And so based upon that model and those calculations, we know where we probably can expect some challenges. And so if I have an area where I have a heavy rain and I know I may have some challenges there, that model tells us that. And based upon what we know and the priority of those, that's where we look at those dollars. And then when we see those high priority areas, then that's when we overlay equity. So we have a process for that. We look at the data to tell us what is happening in our system, and we have sensors in our system that tells us that information. So if I have a rain event, right, and I know I have 40 homes that could potentially be impacted with basement overflows or some large overflows, we look at that. And if I have a community that may have a large rain event and maybe one time have one house that's impacted, we're going to put our dollars with the bigger return on that investment. And then we're going to look at those bigger returns on our investments, and we're going to overlay equity. Where do we need to get it done first? And that's what we do. And that's why we say equity in all we do. And then when you transition to the business side of it and how we spend those capital dollars is critical. And we talked about our small business program, but we also are working on other programs to be able to unbundle contracts so that we can get what we call subprime or some growing companies to be able to get them to be general contractors. That is something that Mayor Scott is working on with DPW to figure out how we get more Baltimore businesses to be able to be general contractors with their A license to understand how to do this work and to prepare themselves for this work so they understand bonding, so that they understand how to get their payroll, that they understand city processes and how to submit bids. And so we're going to be doing an intentional effort to what we call breakdown of some of our contracts. So say I have a $10 million contract and it does 10 miles of pipe replacement. What we want to do is break it down into $2 million projects, right, for 2 miles of pipe replacement so that a smaller contractor can have opportunity at that work because they can't get a $10 million bonding capacity, but they can get $1 million or $2 million bonding capacity. That enables them to do that work, and that enables them to grow their business, right, and that enables them to now be more competitive. And what that does for us, it eventually over a long time, it drives down the cost because now we have a lot more competition in the workplace. And we have Baltimore City residents and businesses being more successful. And that's an intentional effort when we say equity in all we do on something that we'll be having a lot of conversations within the next 5 months. You all hear a lot about that from Mayor Scott and the work that we're doing around that. And we're excited about that work.
And certainly I am mindful of the time, and thank you, Commissioner Foster. Just for the record, and then Director Mitchell, I'll invite you to offer your closing comments. Chief Kelly, remind me, what's the time frame that we keep the record open for public comment? 7 days. All right, so 7 days from today, the record will remain open. If there are any comments, follow-up questions from the commissioners, anything that needs to be included, it will remain open until March 1, 2023. And so please, commissioners, if you have follow-up questions, please forward them via email to Chief Kelly so that we can get them to Director Mitchell in a timely manner. Director Mitchell, we're also mindful of the announcement that you will be transitioning out of your role. And so feel free if there's some areas that you think we should be attuned to, and I appreciate the way you're handling the transition. Sometimes transitions take on a character of their own, and they can be a distraction, but that appears not to be the case here, so I want to acknowledge that publicly. And thank you and all of your team, Deputy Director and Office of Equity and Environmental Justice, Dr. Merrick. That's a whole different title. I wasn't expecting OEEJ. That's not an acronym that we typically get. And to all of the folks from HR and Labor Relations, thank you for your presence tonight. So, sir, you have the floor for any closing comments. After your closing comments, I will hear from the commissioners in this order: Commissioner Johnson, Foster, Evangelista, and Commissioner Finnegan-Carr, and then we will prepare to adjourn. You have the floor.
No, thank you, Dr. Chair, for that. I just would like to say, first, I want to thank this commission for giving us an opportunity to present this. Again, when we talk about outreach, when we talk about education, these are the forums that allow us to be able to communicate that. Even though, some of the questions are tough, we need to make those answers to the public, and we need to be accountable to those. So I thank you all for giving us the forum to do that. I also want to thank our team, right? As you saw, our team has a lot of information. And able to jump in and lift up the voice and be able to communicate what's going on with Baltimore City Department of Public Works. And I just always want to give a shout out as we work to be best in class. We do that as a collective. It takes every person in DPW to do that, and I'm proud to work with each and every one of our folks in Baltimore. Also like to say, as I transition out, it won't be a distraction. My goal has always been supporting our residents. I live in West Baltimore. I'm looking to stay in West Baltimore. Once I, there was some challenges at home, I'm looking to roll my sleeves up and really work for Baltimore. And so you won't see any distractions because we love Baltimore, and I love Baltimore. My family loves it. My kids go to public schools here. My mom goes to the senior center. And, folks have adopted us into this community, and we're proud of that. So the reason why you won't see much happen is because we have a smart, excellent, dedicated team to do this work. That's how these programs got back engaged. That's how some of the programs that you see that will roll out that talks about equity, that's going to get more folks into business with the city, programs that's going to be more equitable across the city. When we look at how we stabilize rates, when we look at how we think about how we spend our money, those are the things that are coming from the 2,000 people that work from DPW. And so we're proud of each and every single one of them. But we also are thankful for the opportunity when commissions like yourself give us the opportunity to discuss these in open forum so people can know. And so I just wanted to say that, take the time to thank all you wonderful folks for giving us this opportunity, and know that we're standing here ready to come back anytime to answer your questions so that we can make sure that we have this honest dialogue and can understand where we're going forward and what you can expect out of your Department of Public Works. So again, I just want to thank you all for allowing us this opportunity.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
I just want to tell you all thank you for coming. I mean, for me, and I probably can, I think my colleagues will echo that, there was transparency and authenticity in how you all responded to our questions. You don't often get that in some hearings, and so I think for me, I really appreciated that because the questions are difficult. I mean, part of our job is to think about what does it mean for how we continue to grow with an equity focus in the community, and you all obviously have made it part of the work that you do, from not just the taglines, but the way you've structured your offices, how you've matrixed across your organization and your engagement. So I appreciate it. I know they can get sometimes intense, but I think you all handled it well, and I really appreciate just the authenticity that you brought to your answers and just saying, hey, these are areas that we need to grow. This is not something we thought as much about. We were focusing on all this, there are all these other fires, but we will now, we will make sure that we put more attention towards these other things that were raised. So I appreciate it, and that's all I have. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Foster, thank you.
I just want to echo Commissioner Johnson's comments. Sir, thank you to your team for being here. Very thorough presentation. I think all the answers to our questions were also very thorough. And, as you transition, I believe DPW is going to be in good hands. So thank you.
Commissioner Evangelista.
Yes, I echo the same sentiments, and I thank you so much for your presentation this evening. I think we gained a lot of valuable information, and I appreciate your time as well as your team.
Thank you. Commissioner Finnegan-Carr.
Thank you. I believe my sentiments echo those of my colleagues. Your vision of DPW to be a strong proponent and protector of our environment and the health and vitality of our communities definitely comes through in how you all presented yourselves this evening and how you all have presented your organization and what you do for the communities here in Baltimore City. And so I commend you for what you have done and what you all will continue to do. And Director Mitchell, we commend you and Godspeed with what you do next here in Baltimore.
Thank you. Chief Kelly, anything on behalf of Director Moore before we prepare to adjourn?
No, sir.
All right. Let me certainly join my colleagues in expressing our appreciation as a commission. I want to acknowledge that Commissioner Akwe was with us for a time, and he left a short time ago. But the purpose of these hearings is to really kind of help educate all of us, not just the commission, but the people of Baltimore City, to understand what are the different components that make city government work for them. A lot of times the conversation is totally concentrated in some very narrow ways, and the important work of public works often gets kind of lost in the discussion. One of the things we didn't hit on, but I want to mention it as we prepare to adjourn, is I looked at the data point around contaminants in the water, and very interested to know that Baltimore City provides water to, let me make sure I got them right, Baltimore County, Howard County, Anne Arundel County, Carroll County? Did I miss one? Harford County. That's an important thing to kind of bring to the forefront, because very often Baltimore is looked upon and sometimes treated as an island unto itself, detached from what goes on in the region. And even though there isn't a regional public works plan, we are the regional public works partner here in Baltimore City, and so you all are to be commended for the work that you do. Along those lines, a lot of conversations have gone on since the Flint water crisis. What's going on with the quality of the water? And I was very pleased to look on the site last night to see when we look at the lead and other contaminants, those thresholds very, very low. And so I appreciate that work as well, because the area that brings us to this discussion tonight is really the health and welfare responsibility for the Community Relations Commission as it goes toward the concerns about discrimination. And while we spent a lot of time talking about the administrative and operational sides of it when it comes to employees and personnel, the conversation tonight has been very enlightening, and so we appreciate all the work that you do, particularly recognizing that there's a shortage of resource, not enough time in the day to get everything done, but the commitment is beyond question, and so I want to make sure that that is on the record. If there are any needs that the team will have in the coming weeks where the Community Relations Commission or the Office of Equity and Civil Rights can be supportive, please let us know. Don't forget, as you are having these conversations around review of the CBAs and the negotiations there, that is one area where we will want to have some follow-up to make sure there aren't any unintended consequences in the negotiation as it relates to equal employment opportunities. So we will certainly look to follow up with you on that. For those who are practicing Christianity as your religious faith, we certainly want to acknowledge the beginning of the Lenten season today. So it is our hope that you have had a blessed Ash Wednesday and will have a blessed Lenten season. For those who observe other faith traditions, I hope you've had a blessed day and will have a good number of days in the days to come. You've noted that March 1st, close of business, the record will remain open. If there are any follow-up questions that will be needed, please get them to Chief Kelly in enough time to get them to the director. With that, we have handled the business for the evening. There's nothing else to be handled tonight. The Community Relations Commission for Baltimore City will stand adjourned until the next appointed meeting. Thank you for your presence this evening.